What was to be gained by taking this man to trial and proving, in an effort to prove all of these charges? Jerry did what was right for Jerry and his family. Who am I to judge that?
A Raised Red Living Blue production. For educational purposes, this series relies on publicly available news, court records, and interviews. This podcast does not intend to defame, harm, or misrepresent any person, organization, or entity. Views expressed are not legal advice, and all individuals are presumed innocent unless proven guilty. As these are ongoing legal matters, facts may evolve. Listener discretion is advised due to discussions of violence and trauma.
Shelby County Grand Jury has indicted a man on multiple charges after deputies found
DA
explosives.
Ben Fuller says that Jerry Clarke is in police custody on a
Jerry decided to
$400,000
exercise his
bond.
First Amendment rights on his own property by putting up anti-Trump signs.
Alabama Injustice Season 1. The Silencing of Jerry Lee Clarke.
All right, y'all, welcome back to another episode of Alabama Injustice, the silencing of Jerry Lee Clarke. I'm joined by Mr. Roy Johnson today with AL.com. To my knowledge, you're the only reporter that's given this case much coverage, if any at all.
I just always found it intriguing, and it's a complicated case. It's one with a lot of nuances, and once I heard of it, once I spoke with his daughter, Catherine, for the first time and began to sort of peel back the layers of the onion, it just became a story that I felt was worth telling.
How did this sign land a 66-year-old Shelby County man in jail? Jerry Lee Clarke simply wanted to express his feelings, exercise his free speech on a sign in his yard in front of his house. It read, "Not my president," and had a big red X crossed across Donald Trump's name.
And did she reach out to you? Is that how you came to know about this case, or did you hear it through the grapevine, or how did that happen?
I heard it from a mutual friend
Okay.
who gave me a synopsis and connected us.
Great. And you've obviously found the story interesting
Oh,
and
absolutely.
wanted to raise some awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have a very complex criminal justice system in this country that operates through many weaves and ups and downs and through many tunnels. And so I was intrigued at the storyline and why things occurred, how they occurred, and then particularly with the bail that was put on this, that the fact that clearly, and we'll get into this, a $400,000 bail said that the system felt that this was a dangerous person. And so just didn't necessarily believe that they had the evidence to show that. And I just wanted to tell that story and tried to do it with just by putting the facts out there and letting people decide for themselves if this was justice or not.
It's been interesting to us that there has been so little coverage of this case, but I don't know if that's normal or typical, atypical. I don't really know.
There's no normal anymore. I mean, it's a complicated story. It's not one that's easy to tell in small bites or in small segments. It takes formats like this one and an opportunity that I had to just let the story breathe, to lay out the facts, to make several phone calls. It was not a story that was put together quickly.
Yeah.
So it took several weeks of reporting and digesting and dissecting before it came out. So there aren't a lot of places that maybe have the resources or the mindset to invest that kind of time in a story that at the time really had no conclusion. There was no if this, then what. The then what was still out there because his trial was months off, and so it was a tough story to tell. So again, not many places may have had the time or inclination to invest in it.
Yeah, well, I'm so grateful you agreed to do this, and was just hopeful because we haven't, in addition to not having news outlets respond, because Catherine's, she's a woman on fire. So she's leaving no stone unturned. But with the release of the podcast and reaching out to other folks, nobody wants to come forward. I'm new to this whole criminal investigative journalism arena. So I don't really know if that's normal. There has been some suggestion that Shelby County is intimidating.
We live in unique times.
Yeah.
There are things that people are responding to, and in ways people are responding, authorities are responding, that are never happened in my lifetime. And I'm going to be 70 years old later this year. So I've seen some things, and I've never seen anything like that. We have communities that are on the edge. We have people that are on the edge who may be afraid to speak their mind, because we now are living under a system where people are punished sometimes for their point of view. So I can see how people may not want to come forward, because very few people want to put themselves in that situation. So I always admire, we can go back to the foundation of this country, which was built on people who weren't afraid of the authority, who weren't afraid of King George or any repercussions. They weren't afraid of the British soldiers. And so having people who are fearless to speak up and come forward is something that is not unique to this time. And so I always admire those who take that risk to say that they believe this is wrong, and be able to say it no matter what the circumstances or the repercussions might be.
Can we talk a little bit about your resume? I mean, you've got a lot of qualifications and a lot of lived experience, but it strikes me when you say that you're a 70-year-old man, and we're in unprecedented times given the history of Birmingham. And I don't know, excuse my ignorance, but I don't know, like, if you were a journalist during the civil rights movement here, and what all have you seen? It seems like that's just a very powerful statement, given what you may or may not have already been exposed to.
I didn't grow up here, so I wasn't here during that time. I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which has its own
Yes.
civil rights history. My father, who was also named Roy, was a survivor of the 21 Race Massacre. He did not have kids until he was late. I was born in 1956. So in the 60s, 63, 64, when the civil rights movement was on fire here in Birmingham and throughout the South, I was still young. I was still preteen. So didn't really know much about it at the time, but lived in a place that was born out of the ashes of the race massacre, but was a thriving Black community. It was a thriving economically. Sure, most of your listeners and viewers have heard of Black Wall Street.
Yes.
My father owned a store on Greenwood Avenue, which was the heart of Black Wall Street. Most of the families that went to our church, et cetera, were law-abiding, Black middle class families at the time who, many of them were entrepreneurs, or they might have been train porters, they may have been maids or butlers at people's homes, but they were proud people who were trying to make a change, to try to live a change, and then try to pour into my generation, new opportunities and the boldness to be able to go places and do things that maybe they weren't able to do. I tell people that I'm old enough to remember the Kennedy assassination. I was in second grade at the time. That's my bookmark, is really literally having a visual recollection of that. And then so when I say I've seen some things, when you go back that far and you see not only that, the King and Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy assassinations as well, these civil rights acts that were enabled. I didn't know much about them, but I remember my parents taking me to a restaurant. It was a cafeteria, the Piccadilly Cafeteria in downtown Tulsa, where Blacks couldn't have gone prior to the 64 Civil Rights Act passing. We went down there for Sunday dinner. I remember the food was terrible. I wanted to go back to the Black neighborhood. But the fact that my dad and mom took it upon themselves to take us, my brother and I, to that restaurant is something that I remember. And then, of course, just over the last several decades, whether it was affirmative action, whether it was AIDS, a lot of things that have been hot button issues and injustices that needed to be righted. I've had a great front row seat as a journalist to be able to either chronicle them or just observe them through a journalist's mind, and I've been very grateful for that opportunity.
Yeah, and is this the type of story you typically do? Is this something new that you've covered, or do you do all kind of different?
Yeah, I do what I believe. A, it has to move me.
Okay.
And B, I see the value in perhaps helping to enlighten others. Now, not every story is this in-depth or unique or intriguing. Some just might be a local person who has done some things to has overcome some odds, to improve their neighborhood, to improve their city, their state, maybe an issue on a local, state, or national level that people are talking about, that is moving people, that is causing people to debate. Or it may just be something that morning pisses me off.
Gotcha.
It just depends on my mood, and sometimes I'll grab onto something that takes several weeks, if not months, to report, to digest, and to unfold to the point where I can articulate it in a way that will at least make people think and bring them into the story to allow them to assess their own, create their own opinions.
I think maybe you've alluded to this already, but it seems to me like maybe what moved you was Jerry's age and his limited physical capacity, maybe, or in contrast, how he was labeled as a threat to society. I mean, this is a very feeble man.
He wasn't feeble when he went in.
True.
So it wasn't that. His age, possibly. Again, he's 60, mid-60s, late 60s, so he's seen some things as well.
Yeah.
And he expressed his opinion on his own property with a sign, and people do it all the time. They do it during elections. They do it. If you drive through Alabama, you'll often see you mostly see pro-Trump signs, but you will see those in places, and it's legal, right? On your own property, it's free speech, First Amendment. And so he exercised his right to express his opinion on his property, and repercussions came with that. He did some things to try to counter that, and ultimately it escalated to the point where he ended up in jail, which I found absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
He had, again, a sign in your front yard on your property would move people to a place of action, tearing it down, driving by, honking. And then you put yourself in that situation, the Jerry Lee situation. Were all of his reactions perfect? Probably not, but put yourself in that situation. You have the right to express your opinion on your own property, and you have the right to protect your property. So those conditions conflicted and came together in this unique circumstance that all of a sudden landed this American, this painter, someone who has supported their family throughout their lives, landed him in jail, and then ultimately over the course of being there for, almost a year, saw his health decline and had some things happen to him to where he is now much more frail than he was when he went in.
Yeah, just a shell of his former self. So there are a lot of the circumstances around the case that I guess will remain unproven or disproven because it won't go to trial. And, the Shelby County has their interpretation of how it went down, and of course the family and the rest of us have differing opinions as well. But it seemed to be a coordinated effort to silence him. I mean, I'm wondering what your opinion is on the theme, the name, the title of this podcast, in the silencing of Jerry Lee. Obviously, when you have things like booby traps, explosives, bombs, much less a biological or bacteriological weapon, that, to me, like when she came to me with the case and I read your article, I was like, well, maybe he's where he's supposed to be. What is your feeling on the charges, or do you have an opinion on the charges in terms of them being excessive? Do you think there was any injustice there in terms of his arrest?
Well, Jerry Lee wouldn't be the first person in America who might have been overcharged, right?
Right.
And if you speak to prosecutors, sometimes you layer on some things and hope that you can fall somewhere in the middle. Even when I spoke to someone in the prosecutor's office, he said people get stuck on the word biological weapon, and it's just more of a legal term that they used for a substance that was found that probably could be found in most kitchens. So
yeah.
It wasn't like this was a nuclear biological weapon. So even the prosecutor said that don't get stuck on that terminology as opposed to explosives. And even that's a word that can mean many things, right? use explosives on fire on New Year's Eve
Yeah.
and on 4th of July. Most of us have all held something that exploded. So that's a hot button sort of word in and of itself. So, but again, what intrigued me was the $400,000 bail. So they must have felt that he was a danger to either himself or to others. And even again, when I spoke to the prosecutor, the tone seemed to admit that it was a unique amount of bail for those charges. So it was less for me about guilt or innocence. It's like, are you keeping someone here with this amount of bail justifiably? You know, have your trial, right? Go ahead and prove your case. But should the person be in jail for this entire time? And again, the trial was not scheduled till August of this year, so they would have been in jail for a year and a half. So for me, it was more about the excessive bail than the specific charges, because ultimately the prosecutors would have had to prove that in court. And maybe they got to the point where they realized, you know what, maybe it's not worth it to try to do that. Plus, they were taking care of him medically. He was in the medical facility of the jail. There has to be a cost to that. I mean, this is your money and my money that is taking care of a man who was in failing health, and that has to be expensive. So there are a lot of nuances and costs to this that ultimately it seemed that the prosecutors came to the belief that, you know, let's somehow resolve this in a way that allows them to say that he pled guilty to something and allows him to go home.
Yeah. So in a sense, but it's like both sides are kind of admitting some fault in a sense. I'm sure the way that the charges that he pled to, I mean, he's admitting to guilt. So it kind of takes the burden of proof off of the county, the sheriff's department, the DA's office. But at the same time,
make it clear he didn't plead guilty to every charge.
Right. A lot of the charges were dropped.
A lot of the charges were dropped. What he pled guilty to were more harassment charges. Again, shining a laser in a car as it's passing by.
He's facing 2 harassment charges and 1 for reckless endangerment. Police say he pointed a blue laser at drivers as they went by, and even an officer.
Yeah.
You don't do that. But again, that's not. Is that meritorious? Does that deem worthy of being in jail for almost a year and having a $400,000 bond?
How about the response from the community, like the people who were against this sign, all the harassing, all the foul language and derogatory remarks they yell as they pass by? In maybe a broader sense, does the culture war and just the friction, the divisiveness, the tone, the rhetoric, is any of that concern you?
Oh, absolutely. It concerns me every day. We often talk about how do we get through this? How do we get past this? How do we get back to the point where we can disagree on an issue over here and yet still break bread, still go root for the same team, still talk about family, still do the things that we focus on, the things we have in common. So yeah, I mean, it definitely concerns me that how we're responding to each other over things that ultimately have no impact on our lives. Right. Him having that sign in that yard had no impact on anybody's life. So I think all those people who reacted, look at yourself when you, not you, but I'm saying when you had that kind of reaction.
Yeah.
I think it's incumbent on all of us to look at ourselves and say, why am I doing this? What is it about me that's making me have this visceral response to something that truly has no impact on my life? And if we can have those, you have to start having a conversation with the person you see in the mirror. If you feel you're justified in doing that, that's totally up to you. But I have much bigger things in my life to worry about than somebody else's sign in their neighborhood. I have family obligations. I try to keep myself healthy, try to act in a way that honors my faith and my God. I'm not worried about somebody's sign, but we have taken things like this and allowed them to make us crazy. to make us react in ways that, again, that have no impact on our lives. Like some of the emails that I get, people mad about things that have no impact on their life, no impact on anybody that they know. Now, it may be impacting someone else, the person who's being snatched off the street, for instance, immigration policies, or a company that has to go under and raise prices because of tariffs. It has impact in that way. But when you start just having this visceral reaction over something that from the moment you get up in the morning to the moment you go to bed has nothing to do with your life, then you got to look in the mirror.
Well, it's interesting. I think it's a good segue into another talking point where you're just mentioning faith. And, what strikes me is that I think a lot of those people that had this visceral reaction would consider themselves people of faith. And yet, this is their neighbor, this is their fellow citizen, fellow American, fellow child of God, if you believe that. Like, what does that say about where we're at and where we're going and the hypocrisy of religion?
I don't know if it's the hypocrisy of religion, it's people, right? You often say, before you take any action, have you filtered it through God? Is this, remember the bracelets they used to wear?
Yeah.
What would Jesus
Yes.
do? Would Jesus have thrown those bottles
Right.
into the driveway? Would Jesus have pulled their truck up and pulled the sign down? Yes, Jesus went through and flipped the tables for the people who were overtaxing the piper. He had his moments, right? Jesus had his moments.
He did.
But for the most part, you won't find where he condemned people who were different. He condemned people who thought different. He tried to teach them, tried to try to educate them. And the scripture is full of guidance, right? How we treat the least of these. Do unto others as you want done unto you. So it's not the hypocrisy of religion, it's hypocrisy of the people who are using religion to justify something in them that's broken. And that's not unique. Wars have been fought over religious differences. So what we're seeing in that vein is not different. But yes, some of the things that people are doing today and saying, well, I think their first thing they have to do is go back and really go read the Bible, go read the scriptures,
Right.
and tell me where this is justified. And we can have a differing opinion, right? About any subject, but are you truly filtering your reactions through the lens of your faith, through the lens of scripture?
I'm curious, where is your mindset, or how do you stay grounded and focused on what you need to do, but also remain hopeful?
Yeah, I've always tried to be a glass half full person as opposed to half empty, and I do believe that everything happens in accordance with its purpose and its time. When Trump was first elected in 2016, I wrote a column that said maybe this needed to happen. We were coming off an era, the Obama administration, where we thought things were okay, right? We were okay. Look at what we did as a country.
Yeah.
And yet, I remember when Obama was elected, that one of the things I felt would happen was that it would unleash a torrent of racism, quite frankly, among people who basically heads would explode at seeing a black president. And what we've seen is exactly that. It did touch a nerve in a segment that unleashed the Proud Boys, that unleashed MAGA, unleashed an insecurity among some people that said, no, we can't have this. And that process, that point of view began to emerge and infect other parts of society and start to say, no, affirmative action, DEI is bad. LGBTQ rights are bad. Women's rights are bad. Trying to take all those things away that were emblematic of the progress that this country had made to be a more open and inclusive society. And so what we're seeing is exactly that. So none of this really surprises me. Mm-hmm. And I remain hopeful because we've gotten through stuff. I mean, if you know your history, we have gotten through, we as a nation, we as a world have gotten through things. I've told my children when Trump was first elected, I said, it's gonna be okay. And then with this one, I still held on to that. I said, okay, democracy is going to be challenged. And I firmly believe that ultimately, it will bend, but it won't break. And I think what we're seeing in Minnesota is the emergence of an America that says, no, we don't want to treat people like this. No, we don't want to have an economy that is not fair to a significant segment of people. No, we don't want to use SNAP benefits as a weapon and have people go hungry. No, we don't want the cost of health insurance for people living on the margins to go up in order to benefit the rich, the wealthy from a tax perspective. No, we don't want a president who is enriching himself personally. The New York Times recently reported that he's made $1.4 billion. We don't want a president who takes a plane from Qatar.
Altogether, Trump has pocketed over $1.4 billion. That's 16,822 times the median U.S. household income. And here's the thing. We made this estimate using publicly available records. So this figure is a minimum, not a full accounting.
I think we're seeing is the emergence of that America in Minneapolis. And we saw with the previous elections that many of the people who were trying to puppet and parrot the MAGA perspective were not elected, right? And people were like, nah, maybe we don't want this. And that's the fear of the midterms. That's the fear that what Republicans see with the midterms. It's like, oh my gosh, what we thought was what people wanted maybe is not what the preponderance of Americans want. They don't want to see their neighbors ripped from the streets, people who work in their coffee shops, who go to the same health club as they do. They don't want to see families broken up. You have to be of a certain age to remember this, and it may not have ever happened even in my lifetime, where literally people are ripped up off the street by masked, armed federal agents who are equipped with war-like weaponry, grabbing teenagers, grabbing working people, people who've paid taxes, people who've lived here for decades, who are not criminals. Their only offense is not having paperwork, which is a civil violation. It's not a criminal violation. Every bit of data will tell you that the vast majority of people who've been deported are not the worst of the worst, not even close. If they have a traffic violation, they might have smoking marijuana in their teens or something that, maybe they shouldn't have done, but it's not a deportation issue. So I think most Americans are what I'm hopeful is that Minnesota is a bellwether for people just saying enough is enough. We're not going to tolerate this. We're not going to perpetuate this. We are not going to empower our leaders to take a very narrow view of those who should benefit and penalize people who think differently, who may have a different opinion. That's not who we are. We were founded on that kind of a revolution, right? Our forefathers, our founding fathers, thought differently from the king. That is what became the foundation of who we are. So for us to now attack those within our own country who may think differently than our leaders goes against the very foundation of our existence.
I promise we're going to get back to Jerry in a second, but I'm fascinated by some of your responses and just feel compelled to ask you about DEI. I don't understand where this war on DEI is coming from. The only assumption I have is that white people are afraid. They feel like rich, powerful white people are afraid that they're losing their grip. Or they've been afraid and concerned they've been losing their grip on the country for a long time, and they're becoming the minority. And so that freaks them out. Do you think that's what it is? Or are they right that DEI is a sham that hurts all people, no matter what their race is?
No, they're absolutely wrong about that, unequivocally wrong. DEI is just a descendant of affirmative action, and which is a descendant of programs that were put in place to right historical wrongs, right? We for hundreds of years, this nation legally and summarily prevented mostly African Americans from being able to pursue happiness, right? In the way that our Bill of Rights and Constitution allows. Jim Crow, all of these laws were put in place that stymied. The GI Bill did not apply to black veterans. Black vets fought for their country, came back, and they could not get the same access to the same qualities and same opportunities that white veterans could. So all these systems were in place. Affirmative action and others came to try to rectify that. So it's really just about leveling the playing field. I had a conversation with a friend today, and we were talking about this. And he said he's a late 50s white man. And he said that there have been opportunities that he, as a white 50-plus-year-old man, did not get. And he felt that, that may have been a factor. And I said, that is totally cool. But the thing that you said that probably was the biggest factor was being in your 50s. Because I know that I've lost opportunities because of my age in certain times in my career. But it's easier for particularly white men is what we're talking about. It's particularly for white men to blame being white as opposed to even age discrimination, which is not right, but it's something that happens in our society and has been happening for decades. Or, gosh, the fact that this other person might have been better. And I often use this analogy because I had a reader once who sent me an email who said that if he saw a black pilot, or if he was about to go into surgery and saw that his heart surgeon was black, that he would automatically feel like they weren't as good because they got in under affirmative action or DEI. I said, well, let me give you another perspective. That physician and that pilot's parents probably would not have been able to even get into the program to be trained to become a pilot or a physician. So affirmative action broke down those barriers that allowed these people, their sons, their daughters, to enter into those programs. But once they got in, they had to go through the same training, they had to pass the same tests. As a matter of fact, that generation, my generation, was raised that you had to be twice as good as the person sitting next to you. So if I get on a plane and see a black pilot, or if I'm going into surgery and see a black physician, I would say that person is uber trained,
Right.
because of what they had to go through in order to be sitting in that seat, in order to have that position. So what DEI did was just open a door that had been closed for generations. Once the person walked through the door, there was no guarantee that they were going to ascend to a position of success. They had to, again, meet the same requirements, pass the same tests, go through the same rigor as everyone else. And if they get there, God bless them. That means they're really damn good and persevere. So diversity, equity, and inclusion, affirmative action literally just opens a door. There's no guarantee of success. There's no guarantee of outcomes. It has been wrongly placed as a guarantee of outcomes. It's absolutely not a guarantee of outcomes. It's not even a guarantee, but it's opening opportunity. There's a big gap between opportunity and outcome. If you're going to deny me opportunity for over a century, you can be upset when that opportunity opened. I happen to be as good as you. Of course that's gonna, because you weren't raised to think that. You weren't raised to think that a black person could be, or a brown person could be as good as you. So that insecurity that you might feel is because maybe you haven't been exposed to those perspectives. And I did a column recently that challenged that crazy comment that Trump made about whites being treated very, very badly since the civil rights movement. If you look at the census data from the 60s to now, white people have done okay, right? It's still on the preponderance. The net worth gap is still as strong as it was. The home ownership gap, college graduates, whites are still doing very well, have done very well in the half century since the civil rights movement. So unfortunately, and my friend said this, that a perspective has been based on fear and favor. Fear that their favor is diminishing.
Yeah.
Right?
That's it.
And that's it, fear and favor. And so if you can get people to see that, and some won't, God bless them. If they want to believe that they're being unfairly treated, then I'm perfectly fine with that. But I'm comfortable, and I'm a product of that, right? I could not have gone to Stanford University if I was 10 years older. And not even Stanford, they didn't even have discriminatory policy. You're talking about California.
You're right.
But there are a lot of places that I could not have gone to school if I was 10 years older. So I may not have gotten jobs at some of the places I had before maybe not because they were discriminatory, but because they just didn't look at people like me. Affirmative action was not about guaranteeing you hire someone, but opening the doors to look at more people, look at more resumes, look at diverse backgrounds. Don't only look at people from a certain neighborhood or people that you know. When you're hiring, there's a tendency to just think about people you know. You got to expand that, because the best person for the job may be somebody you don't know. And I tell managers that all the time, that the person you want, you probably have never met. And until you expand your perspective, or do you expand your reach, you may not meet the best person for the job.
Do you feel like there has been a machine that has been roaring since like the 60s to demonize the left and Democrats?
Well, I don't know if it's been a systematic machine that long. Certainly in the last 8 to 10 years, there has been an effort, and I spoke to that, to try to stop what was happening from a progressive standpoint. You mentioned rich whites, and if you look at MAGA, it is not, so I get people who may have voted because they wanted to lower their taxes, right? Who wants to pay more taxes? Nobody wants to do that. But everything has another side, and it has another cost. I do have friends that I've known since high school, and I went to a predominantly white private school, so many of them, are, not many, but, different sides of political spectrum, and some who voted for him because, or at least one in particular, he was going to lower their taxes, and he said he was going to lower the deficit. That's why they voted for him. And we had a very heated conversation on that election day, because I said, okay, A, he lies, and B, there's much more that comes with him. And it probably took about 3 months before that person called me back and said, you were right, that his personal desire to see his taxes lowered he didn't want that to come with what else has happened, what was already happening, the immigration policies, the executive orders to just make things illegal, the stopping of grants to, health grants, by just literally filtering words. If it said black, if it said women, if it said gender, if it said LGBTQ, boom, millions of dollars were just stripped out of the system for projects and for research that was saving lives simply because of these new words that they were demonizing. So there was an element of folks who just wanted their pocketbooks to be lighter. And I get that, but everything comes with a cost. But the preponderance of MAGA is not rich. They're poor white people.
Right.
Right? And so it fascinates me to, when you look at them, say, he doesn't care about you. His policies are not created to help you, i.e., the SNAP benefits, the fact that people were going, those were whites that were going hungry.
It's like, 35% or SNAP recipients are white in Alabama, something like that, or is it higher?
It's probably higher than that. That 103,000 people here, over 100,000 people in Alabama were going to see their health care costs soar because Congress would not extend the subsidies to pay for that. So his policies do not benefit a large segment of those who support him. Many of the people who've been deported voted for him. For whatever reason. So that's what fascinates and boggles my mind, that again, fear and favor. Someone always said, if you want to really get someone on your side, make them feel that they're better than someone else. And so what this movement has successfully done, is to make poor whites feel that they are better than the brown people, better than black people. And so therefore I'm going to support this person because he gets me, he sees me. But nothing he does in reality actually helps that person. And you're right, for people who don't know history, it's easy to be caught up in the moment. And this is a unique and strange and sometimes frightening moment. But we've seen a lot in this country, and like I said, even in my 70 years, I've seen a lot. And I'm hopeful now, again, because Americans have stepped up and said, no, we're not, this is not who we want our nation to be. And we'll certainly see in the midterm elections if that comes to fruition in other ways. But Minneapolis gives me hope that most Americans do not want to see what has happened today. And someone gave me another great analogy that this administration is great at tearing things down, but not building things up. You look at DOGE, you look at tariffs, you look at Venezuela, you look at East Wing of the White House, right? All these things are torn down, but what's been put in their place? You know, there were promises with tariffs that haven't come to fruition. I saw something today that tariffs may have done more for China and India than they're doing for us, because people are going
they're cutting us out.
Going to other countries.
Yeah.
So my friend gave me another analogy. He said, and he gave credit, I believe it was former New York Governor Cuomo, who said a lot of people can kick down the barn door, but very few people know how to build a barn. So we're now seeing an administration that kicks things down, breaks things, but doesn't know how to fix them. You know, DOGE has gone through and gutted various departments that now aren't functioning. You know, they can't find people to do the things that need to be done. So it was a campaign built on destruction, but not on building.
Well, I think this fear and favor is going to stick with me because I'm just constantly baffled, yes, but also just, I don't know, it's confusion, it's a little bit of anger when I see, you know, African Americans for Trump, women for Trump, LGBTQ people for Trump, and that you mentioned that people are literally getting deported and still in favor of what's going on and the policies that are sending them maybe to their home country, maybe.
Well, that's changing a bit. I mean, I think at least the statistics that I've seen recently is that whatever gains he might have made going into the election have pretty much been eroded. Now, gains among those groups, among Hispanic Americans, among African Americans, groups that traditionally did not support these types of policies. He certainly made gains going into the 24 election, but that those gains have pretty much been erased after, you know, pretty much just a year of this administration.
Does it surprise you that these Republican political pundits on...
No, whatever it is you're about to say, nothing surprises me. No, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say, like, it's, you know, like the Scott Jenningses of the world. Like, how did they go on cable news night after night after night and still justify the stuff that's going on? God, the complacency. Are they not worried about legacy? And do they not have wives to come home to at night? They're like, what the hell? Who did I marry? And you're setting a bad example for our kids. I'm just like, from the top down, it is so crazy out there.
It takes all kinds, right? And I can't speak to anyone as to what motivates them. It may be money, it may be currying favor, but
it's a motivation.
That's between them and their family and their God. So for me, I try to filter things again through that lens of my faith. You know, is this my family and my circle, right? And those, again, you know, treating the least of these. You treat me as you would treat the least of these as you would treat me. If we all got up every morning and just repeated that and filtered every decision through that one scripture, I think things would be a lot different. But unfortunately, even those who, I won't say claim to be of faith, because everybody, you know, you can be a believer and not an actor. You know, you can believe it without not being practice the things that you believe. So, you know, hopefully, again, if this gives people some tools with which to look at themselves and make some new decisions, and I think we're seeing it every day. People who may have supported him for this reason did not mean for this to happen, did not mean for prices to go up, did not mean for, again, people to be stripped of their humanity, did not mean for entire groups of people to be demonized, like the Somalis, and did not mean for him to be so blatant to, like, okay, I'm not going to keep the black refugees out, but I'm going to bring in Afrikaners because based on lies. You know, they're not being persecuted. They're not being under attack. So I think most people, I've said, sometimes I'm glad he was been so blatant about his actions, because you can't debate. There's no nuance to him. Again, he's tearing everything down. So he did it so quickly that it's easy to see, whoa, that was his motivation, not helping anybody, not creating policies that lift us as a nation. No, he's not just doing it to us, he wants to do it to the world. But Europe stood up to him when he was talking about Greenland, right? They said, nope, we're not doing this. So they let him have his little board of peace and whatever that is, and that'll disappear too at some point.
I do think what we're doing here is also very relevant to Jerry Lee's case, because it makes a case, or at least helps people hopefully maybe to understand, but people have to be open to hearing differing opinions. But it just makes a case of why Jerry Lee was so passionate about what he was doing, and why the sign was so important to him, and why he was able to risk so much, and why it snowballed, because it started out as one sign, and it just, it grew to flags and a comical bust of Trump's head with a crown that was, placed atop the sign, and, barbed wire to keep people out. It was a compound effect. But I think a lot of people just don't understand, like, why is this man, why is he willing to do this? Why is he so passionate about it? And I don't think anybody could make a better case than what you did in the first segment of why people feel so frustrated. But I would imagine we want to have Jerry on, and when he's just not well enough to put a couple sentences together, to be honest with you. So I want to hear from him, but I think you've just done an excellent job of outlining where that came from, where that drive in him came from to stick that sign in the ground, and I'm sure he felt like that was the only thing he could do.
As you were speaking, you talked earlier about history and being a student of history and why it's important to know history. As you were speaking about Jerry Lee, I thought about the Boston Tea Party, right? So we're taught that, okay, a bunch of guys got mad and threw tea overboard. But if you look to see what that was, this was a group of people who were being taxed. So they were over here, colonizers, as part of the British effort. And the British were the dominant force in the world at that time, and they were colonizing property and lands all over the world.
Right.
So they were here, and in order to, they were spending a lot of money to support their subjects here. So they decided, King George decided to put a tax on some things, and one of the things that he taxed was tea. Well, the colonizers felt they didn't have any say in that decision. There was no representation among the political hierarchy in England at the time. And so they protested the tax on tea by attacking this boat and throwing the tea overboard. And that is a story that has survived hundreds of years, the Boston Tea Party, the protesters. Jerry Lee was like the Boston Tea Party, right? I mean, he on his property, he had a sign that expressed his opinion, and outsiders were coming in to try to prevent him from doing that. And when you ask, how could he feel so passionate? Man, I think we should all have something that we're passionate about, to the extent that we would defend our right to do it, that we would go to maybe what some people might consider extremes to support our belief. There are many who believe that the protesters, why would they go out in the -degree weather and march for people they don't know, because they believe that what is happening to their neighbors is wrong.
Well, Kash Patel has found evidence that they're being paid.
So what? So what? I mean, the ICE agents are being paid as well. They're being paid to walk around in mass with weapons and perpetrate these things on people who are residents, right? So they wouldn't even be out there if the policies had not been put in place to begin with. Protesters wouldn't even be there.
Amen.
So I don't care. So tell me, what does that mean? How does that diminish? And it's a distraction. What often happens is when people don't have a real argument for you, they create a distraction. Well, the protesters were paid, so what? There wouldn't have been protesters had there not be armed people on the street
Yeah.
breaking car windows, having people do something that in this country there is no legal right to do. That is prove your citizenship. I do not have to walk around with papers. You don't have to walk around with papers to prove you're a citizen. That is not legal in this country, but the policies put in place are doing that. So I don't care whether they're paid or not. All those bazillion thousands of people on the street, we're all getting a check. I doubt it. But even if they were, I don't care.
Yeah.
The point is the policies that are in place that are creating the condition that led those people or led somebody to pay them to get out there, it would not have happened had not the policies not been as egregious as they are.
And the reality is that what's probably being paid for is hot chocolate, poster board.
It's a distraction.
Wooden stakes to put your sign on. Yeah.
It's a distraction.
Well, back to Jerry Lee's signage, it got pretty out there at the end, in terms of all the different things that were displayed. But it's nothing to ride through rural communities here in Alabama and see somebody that's got like 14 flags, a littered yard of signs, just so over the top for Trump. I voted for the felon. They've got it all. What I'm seeing and what is frustrating me a lot about the time we're living in right now is just not just the hypocrisy, but the double standard.
Well, the intolerance.
Yeah.
Right. The fact that we can agree on 6 different things, but if we disagree on this, then I'm right and you're wrong. I mean, sometimes 2 things can be right at the same time. You have every right to believe what you believe, but if you're going to have a conversation with me, you're going to have to back it up with some facts, because I'm going to back up my perspective with facts. And often people who hold certain positions, the facts they have are flawed. The facts they had are coming from sources that are not reputable. So if you're going to have this conversation with me, if you're going to try to persuade me to your position, I'm not the one to come at with stuff from a website that has no credibility, or just or be distracted by something. Oh, they're being paid. I don't care. Let's get back to the subject we're talking about. Is ICE doing what it should be doing and doing it in a way that uplifts us as a nation or not? I don't care about them being paid. That's a distraction. You can have that conversation with somebody else. So that to me is the core of this issue. Is we can disagree, but let's come at each other with facts, that with information that is real. The president says white people have been treated very badly. Give me what's your fact? You're going to give me one white person who didn't get into a college, right? And that's your foundation for ending all DEI. And you mentioned DEI earlier. So my wife for almost a decade was a consultant in the DEI space. Had a thriving practice working with many companies, universities, to do what it did, and that was help to create an environment where everyone can thrive, no matter where they came from, no matter what their experiences were. To come in and work with leaders and employees to be able to put them in position to have easier conversations with each other. Again, to be on teams with people from different backgrounds so the team can win. She did that for over a decade. You know what? That business has been wiped out in 1 year because of this administration.
Oh my gosh.
She has no clients now in that space. So I've seen it, how it's totally wiped out something that clients felt was valuable, but now fear that they can't do that because of what's coming down from Washington. So yeah, it hits home because it's just makes no sense. But again, you go back to fear and favor, and people fearing that their favor is being diminished.
Yeah. I'm grateful for the fear and the favor. That's going to, as I said, stick with me. But we've seen the rhetoric affect things like the paper at the University of Alabama. It's the crimson and white. But there's a lot of DEI initiatives on college campuses. Really may have nothing to do with employment or jobs. It's just about human rights, civil rights.
Creating safe spaces
Yes.
for students who come from different backgrounds to coalesce and share time and feel like they can be themselves. So that's all that most of that was about. Yeah, many of those places have been wiped out, unfortunately. So it's where we are.
I just want to hammer this point home because I think it's so important, because you just mentioned again that, people need to feel like they're a part of something, or they need to feel like they're better than others. And that probably comes from a past where they were meant to feel less than. But I just never forget, I'm an Auburn person. And I was at a tailgate with a bunch of gay Republican white men, and just kind of overhearing they're having political conversations, and it was very clear that they were MAGA. And I was like, what in the world? Like, how do we explain this? I mean, that's got to be the only explanation, is that they've been kind of ostracized. And because they're pro-Trump, it's like, all right, well, you're going to burn in hell, but come on over here and have some sweet tea with us because you're pro-Trump. But I think that's exactly what's going on in a lot of cases. Would you agree?
Oh, I think, again, everybody just has to look at their own existence and their own why. Like, what's your why? Why are you making this choice? Why are you choosing to drive by a property and yell something or throw something? Why are you choosing to support a candidate? Why are you choosing to attend this church? If we all had a better grasp on our why, then it would make our what's a little bit more sensible, maybe. And maybe we'd be a little bit more honest with ourselves. And so every day, ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I thinking that? And often when I hear from readers who vehemently disagree with me, which of course is their right, I'll ask them, I say, how did you get here? Give me your background. Tell me something. Because we all are living in a specific time and place, right? But we are all impacted by our journey. Every experience, every voice we heard, every win, every loss, all of those things shape this moment and what we're saying, what we do in any given moment. So if you're going to wake up at 7 in the morning and send me a hateful email, I'm curious. I'm like, how did you get here? What makes you, how did you get to this point? And sometimes I end up having a back and forth with folks because everybody had a different experience, right? Mm-hmm. Mine is different than yours. We all get to our different respective places based on our experiences. My pastor says that we're born looking like our parents, but we die looking like our decisions.
Ooh, God, that's good.
So, everything we do is shaping who we are and what emotes from us. So obviously people can disguise it, and you can't tell a MAGA person versus a liberal person versus a far-right person, but sometimes, it comes through in your countenance, how you treat people, how you say hello, how you react to any particular little incident. So yeah, we should all do a better job of asking ourselves what's our why every day.
I love that because it goes into another one of my favorite quotes, like curiosity over judgment. Mm-hmm. And that's how it seems like your response when, you're confronted by an angry reader or...
I just said, do your homework, dude. Yeah. Especially if you're going to come at me, you better come with some facts.
Yeah.
I mean, you have every right to believe what you believe, but tell me why. And give me something real, not something that you might have heard somewhere. Do your own research. Don't send me something that you not determined is actually the truth or it's actually real. So I love a good debate, but you better come strong. You better come right.
Now, you did a live video, was that right? On like TikTok and Facebook. Did you stream it live?
No, we produced it.
You produced it.
Right.
Okay, and then this is one thing that stuck out to me is that I have not read the comments, but Catherine, I think, read every comment. And she noted, and rightly so, she said that there was about, roughly, in her estimation, about 30 to 35% of the comments were positive, pro-Jerry or pro-First Amendment. But my first question to you is, it sounds like you do. Do you go back and read the comments?
Absolutely not.
No?
Absolutely not. I'm going to create a t-shirt that says, don't read the comments. I have to make my wife, don't read the comments. Tell friends, don't read the comments. No, absolutely not.
That's funny. Great advice.
Every once in a while, I might open a bottle of wine and for entertainment value go in there, but there's nothing to gain from that for me. I mean, it's just maybe people aren't necessarily going to give a cogent perspective, thoughtful perspective in a comment. They're just kind of acting out of emotion, and that's okay. But I've got other things to do with my time, and energy and space.
Well, do you usually do these follow-up videos to important stories or stories that are important to you, or is that kind of a new thing for you to do?
We do them occasionally. It depends. We have a great production team that looks at various stories, and we do either explainers or follow-ups, particularly stories that resonate with an audience. And that story resonated from the moment it was published. So it was deemed that it was worth doing a follow-up video to just sort of give the story another sense, another perspective, and try to reach another audience, because not everybody reads on a screen, but they might view a video. So you're reaching another group of people when you do it on that platform.
Yeah. And I'm curious do you think Jerry did the right thing by pleading and getting out for his well-being?
Jerry did what was right for Jerry and his family. Who am I to judge that? He made a decision, and his family made a decision that was better for him to be out, even at a cost. And so that's a decision, again, that he and his family made for them. It's not even remotely my place to judge whether that was the right decision.
Yeah. Do you feel like that Shelby County the DA's office had enough evidence to prove their case? Or can you even comment on that?
I think at some point, there's always a middle, right? Mm-hmm. As I mentioned before, it's not unusual for people to be overcharged, knowing that maybe there's a middle ground. So in that sense, it may not have been an unusual thing that they decided not to go to the mat over every charge and continue to expend public resources on a case where ultimately who was the victim, who was in danger, what was to be gained by taking this man to trial and proving, in an effort to prove all of these charges. So as often happens in the perpetration of justice, or the attempt to reach a justifiable conclusion, there are compromises. And at some point, whether it was public pressure or whatever it is, the office decided that it was worth trying to figure out a medium that allowed them to say they got a conviction and allowed him to go home.
Yeah. I mean, I look at it as, I hate to even say win-win. But, I don't think he was going to make it to trial. I think that was a legitimate concern. Mm-hmm. He was going downhill pretty fast. Mm-hmm. So I think, they did what they had to do. If you Jerry is so grateful to everybody who has produced a YouTube video, a podcast, written an article that has helped him. So I know you probably know that. I know Catherine has probably expressed that to you, or you just assume that. But if you had an opportunity to meet Jerry, if he was here with us today, do you just have any words of encouragement for him? What would you say?
To get well and live your life. Focus on yourself and your family, and be there for them. Let them care for you. Let them help you get stronger so that you are able to be the father, the grandfather, the husband that you were, and that I'm sure that you want to be.
This is kind of snowballing, this effort. I got people reaching out to me from all across the state with stories, but I was curious before we wrap up. There is a story about a man in Baldwin County, Mobile County, that area down there in South Alabama, who has spent 26 years in jail. It was an old 3 strikes you're outlaw. And so he got, the first one was like, it was all like petty theft. The last one was an armed robbery, but the gun was unloaded. And so he was given a life sentence. So this is a black man. His name is Edward. Alabama Appleseed has picked it up. don't know what I'm doing here. Have you heard of this story just by chance?
I've not heard of this one specifically, but there are
Countless.
There's countless cases similar to this. We've done a lot of work, and our team here has exposed many of the people who were either caught up in that 3 strikes rule and have spent decades in jail over something that right now they would not be punished to that extent for, or people who there's evidence now to show that they didn't commit that crime and yet they're still behind bars. So yeah, there's still Alabama, and there's been a lot of things done over the last few decades that certainly aren't justifiable. But thankfully there are places like ours, like yours, like Appleseed that call attention to them, and some of them they're actually able to get righted. And there are I think DAs like DA Danny Carl in East Washington, they've created programs that actually look at past cases to see if there are cases in their offices that should be reviewed because of things that were done incorrectly prior to that. So yeah, grateful for all the folks who utilize whatever they have in their platforms and their resources to try to bring true justice to those who have been unjustifiably incarcerated or charged, in any, with many instances.
Well, thank you so much
Sure,
for doing
absolutely.
this. I know you're a super busy guy. I appreciate it, but just thankful for what you did.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share and what you're doing to kind of bring light to some of these cases. And, I'm sure we'll be talking again.